I'm just going to jump right in. First, let me share my screen. Uh, Share. Okay, do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Let me just move this. I need to move this one. Yeah. Excuse me, the problem with working with three screens. So yeah, today we're going to talk about 3D and CSS. We're going to talk about the true meaning of perspective. This is something, just as they said, I have been in the physical meetup that was in June, and it was always like my dream to do a talk in CSS Cafe, but do a special visualization of what perspective actually means. And I kind of got to do it in physically in Amsterdam, and now I'm going to do it here today to you all. Um, but before we're going to talk about 3D and CSS, let's talk about 3D in general. So uh, the thing that I say, that what I claim is 3D is cool. People actually love 3D, and you can see 3D everywhere from movies and commercials and TV shows and everything. Um, and even on the web, we can already find a lot of 3D elements if it's in the header or if it's in the somewhere in the body. Some has mouse interaction, some are more static. Um, we have like full website that is built with 3D. We have tools like Unity and Spline and 3JS and everything that we need to in order to create this whole 3D world. And it shows, we see it in a lot of e-commerce sites. It shows that your product is in the cutting edge of technology. It shows that you actually knows what to do, what you're doing on the web. Again, it's just cool. And I know some people say, a lot of designers, not a lot of, but I heard designers say that it's just a trend and it's gonna pass really soon. And I have two words for them, or actually two letters: VR. VR is on the rise. We can see new uses of VR every day, and new markets that adopts the use of VR. And if we look at the projections, we can see that the market size is only going to be a lot bigger over the years. Within a few years, VR headsets, going to be like cellular phones today. I'm sure every one of you has this cellular phone right next to you, this nice and shiny new cellular phone, but you also have this old cellular phone thrown away in this drawer somewhere. So in a few years, VR headset's going to be the same, but it is going to take a few years. It's going to take a long time, and over this time, we're going to see a trickle of design. We're going to see the design trickle down from the VR world into our flat 2D screen, into this screen that you're watching me right now. And it's going to be our jobs as web developers to implement those 3D designs. I'm not just talking about 3D buttons or 3D elements. I'm talking about 3D layouts and 3D navigations. I'm talking about 3D worlds, and you can do all those things on the web. And again, some of those things you can and should maybe do it with CSS. So now let's jump specifically into 3D in CSS. And when I say 3D in CSS, the people who knows me knows the type of. Oh, I forgot to open this. I'm sorry. I need to open. Um, I need to open the example that I prepared, but I didn't open it in advance. So just give me 1 second. Can't find it. Here it is. Yeah, so as I said, the people who knows me knows the type of work I'm doing, and maybe you have seen some of these work in CodePen or in Twitter or in some newsletter somewhere. But the type of work I'm doing is with CSS is something like this. And yeah, if you don't know the type of working, this is pure CSS. All the animation is pure CSS. This ping pong table is also pure CSS. This animation, and I can show you a whole day of animations that I've done. Um, this animation is also cool because it interacts with the mouse. When the mouse is up, you can see it from the top. When the mouse is down, you can see it from the bottom. Again, this interaction is also with pure CSS, and all of those interactions, including the movement and the selection, all the animation, again, pure CSS. And as I said, I can go all day, but my purpose is not just doing weird animation. It's taking these concepts and bringing them into real live objects. For example, checkboxes. So you can look at these checkboxes, and when you click on them, so it's just going to jump and going to show you the boxes that you selected. Or example, radio buttons that again 3D, and you can see that you actually push it, or like simple click to open and then it's open in 3D, or even simple play buttons, YouTube play buttons that you when you click it, so the animation is just in 3D instead of just simple transform. So you can absolutely do, and everything that we've seen right now is done with pure CSS, obviously. So yeah, you can use 3D in CSS, and there's no JavaScript needed. Just a little perspective, and I do mean this literally. There is a property in CSS called perspective, and what this perspective give us enable us is to move on all three axes. So if you know, you can absolutely move things with CSS, and if I want to move it, and we have three axes, we live in a 3D world, so when I move it on the x-axis, there's no problem. When I move it on the y-axis is the vertical one from up to down, so there's no problem. But look at the third box. It's actually moving on the z-axis. The z-axis is the axis that is from from you to me. Okay, so this is the z-axis, and it actually does move on this axis, but you don't see anything. Why you don't see anything? Because we are without perspective. If we're going to add perspective, so now we're going to see this cube, this box, this square moving on the z-axis, and you can see it looks like it's getting smaller and bigger, but this is exactly what the perspective does. When something is closer to you, look at my hand, when it's closer it gets bigger, when it's farther away it gets smaller. So this is the whole concept of perspective, and it's actually more clear when you look at rotation. So again, now we're without perspective, and when we are rotating around the z-axis, so there's no problem because nothing is moving back and forth. But look at the y-axis and the x-axis. They're not actually looking like they're rotating. The y-axis looks like getting thinner and wider. It's not it that doesn't look even like it's rotating, again because we're without perspective. If we're going to add perspective, so now we can see that when it rotates, the closest part gets bigger, the part that is in the back looks smaller, and now we can see that it actually rotates, and we can actually see the direction of the rotation. So yeah, this is what perspective give us in a very simple sentence. Things that is farther away from us look smaller, things that are closer to us looks bigger. But when you are working with CSS, when you're working with 3D, other aside than setting the perspective value, you're mainly working with transform. You're using transforms. And transforms, if you don't know, transforms is just a set of functions that allow you to manipulate objects like skew and scale. But the two that we're going to focus on today is translate and rotate. Translate means move, and you can translate on the x-axis, y-axis, z-axis. So if I want to move something to the right, I'm going to say transform, translate X, because I want to translate on the X-axis, 50 pixel or whatever I want. And if I want to rotate it, for example, if I want to rotate it in this direction, so this is the Y-axis, I want to rotate it around the Y-axis, so I say transform, rotate Y 30 degrees or whatever. Okay, but what happens if I want to move it and rotate it. If I want to move it 30 degrees and translate it, what happens then? Well, of course you can do it, there's no problem. But if you're working with multiple transforms, there's actually a few things that you need to remember. When you're, it's thing to remember when you're transforming an object, any object. Uh, the first thing is that the coordinate system actually moves and rotates along with the objects. So if I take an object and I move it 50 pixels to the right, so the y-axis also moves, and the z-axis and everything else moves. All the coordinate system moves with the object. And if I rotate it, the coordinate systems also rotate with this object. The second rule is that the object moves and rotates according to its own coordinates. That means if I take an object and rotate it like 30 degrees and then move it on the x-axis, it's actually going to move diagonally and not straight because I first rotated the coordinate system. Now, combining those two rules, you need to remember the third rule, which is most important, that the order in which these values are written, or these functions are written, can change the end result. And I'm going to show you just a very simple example. Here I have a transform that is rotate 30 degrees and then translate x 140 pixels, excuse me. So on the second example, we have the exact same functions, the exact same values, but in a different order. So you can see that because it's in a different order, it first translates it and then rotates it. In the first example, it first rotates and then translates it. So the order in which those values are written is important. Is actually even more important when you're talking about animations. Again, we have here the same transforms with the same value, but in a different direction. So in the first example, I'm first moving the object 120 pixels. And again, when I'm moving it, I'm also moving the axis, I'm moving everything along with it, and then I'm rotating it. But in the second example, I'm first rotating it and then I'm moving it. And because I'm moving it and because it moves on its own axis, on its own coordinates, it always moves to a different angle. That's why its rotation is much bigger. So the order of transform is obviously very important. Are there any questions so far, by the way? I'm not in the chat, so I'm sorry.
So in the chat, we don't have any questions. Maybe
audience, do you have any?
Me?
No. Okay. I'm going to continue. So, okay, so we understand how to use transform. We're going obviously, by the way, we're going to see some live coding in a few minutes, and we're going to do a lot of live examples and so on. We have more time ahead of us. But okay, so we understood how to move things, but how do we take an object and actually build an 3D object, like construct a building or something simple like a cube? Well, there's actually two main methods that you can use. The either constructive or layered. Constructive means actually taking the sides of whatever shapes that you're building, and each side is an element or pseudo element, and then you just position each one of the element in its place. So if I want to build a cube, I just take 6 sides and I'm going to position each one of them in each side of the cube. The second method is layered. It's very much like 3D printing an object. You actually build layers and layers and layers and layers until you get, and with like a pixel apart from one of them, until you get the full shape. Now, each one of those methods has its own advantages and disadvantages. There's no right or wrong way, and of course you can combine them both. And I'll just give you a few simple examples. So we've seen earlier like cubes and so on, but you can actually build things like this that has more shapes. And if you want to build something like that, obviously you're going to use constructive. This has 12 shapes. These stars, each one of them is built from 20 triangles. So again, you could build it with layered, but it's much more makes much more sense to build it with as constructive. On the other hand, if you want to build something like this one, like this example, so these are the Olympic rings, and they're moving. And if you want to get this really round shape, if I would use the constructive method, I would have to use a whole lot of divs, like hundreds of divs. And here I have only 11 divs because I have just layers of circles, layers of rings. We can actually see it. Let's just inspect it. You can actually see those layers as I move over the dev tools. Yeah, you can see it, right? Okay. And a very good usage for the layer method is by using text. What we see here is the exact same concept, just instead of rings, we have layers and layers of text. And here, each layer got a little different color and shades, just so it would look better. But it's again the exact same principle. Yeah. So back to the presentation. Yeah, so these are the two 3D methods. And the next thing I want to talk about is lighting and shading. So lighting and shading, it's not exactly part of this 3D in CSS, but it is very important because shadows are the way for our mind to position things in the 3D world. And I give you a very common example. Even though we know this woman is not flying on the magic carpet, we see that she's flying on a magic carpet because this is the way our mind analyze this image. A very simple example is, look at these cubes. Which one of them is higher? Which one of them is closest to us, or which one of them is bigger? The reason that you know the exact position, the exact height of each cube, it's because of the shadow. Okay, and it's very important when you're doing animation like this one, for example. So there is a whole lot of work on the animation on the cube and the movement, but there is a lot of work on the shadow. So look at each cube has a shadow and beneath, and when the cube goes up, so the shadow disperses, like it goes like blurry, and there's a shadow on the top of the cube when the other cube passes it. And those small details, actually, even though if you don't notice them, you do notice them subconsciously, and that is the way that your mind translate what is where in the in this 3D world. So again, not specifically a part of the 3D in CSS, but it is important. Another thing that is obviously very, very important is performance. Everybody asked me about performance when doing 3D in CSS. You don't want to work very hard on something and then find out that that nobody can run it on their phone or something. So a few things about performance in when working in CSS. So, excuse me. So the first good news is there's no reflows. Usually, again, the main rule when you're talking about performance in CSS, about runtime performance, is when you're doing animations, don't do animations that trigger reflows, repaints. But when you're using transforms, most of the time you're not animating anything else with it, so it doesn't trigger a reflow. So that's it's kind of a good news. But the second good news is that these days we can use the GPU. Again, I'm not going to talk about too much about performance, but when you're working with 3D, the browser knows that there's too much calculation to do, and it just give the browser the GPU to compose those layers, and then there is no the animation runs much faster. The bad news is, well, first of all, CSS was not meant for it. And as people like to remind me, CSS was not meant to handle big CSS animations or complex animations with multiple with a lot of elements, with a lot of keyframes. when you are working with a lot of divs, when I'm talking about a lot, I'm talking about hundreds of divs or thousands of divs and with a lot of keyframes. So yeah, you might get a lag. But the bottom line is that if you're working with small GUI, for example, like the checkboxes that we've seen in the beginning, there's no worry performance-wise because it's going to run perfectly smooth. Just 6 divs and it's just one keyframe. There's no problem. But if you are working with multi-object animations and like really heavy, like the ping pong table, no, it's not really not the best performance. It's just something to remember. And next thing is, of course, accessibility. Again, I'm not going to talk about too much accessibility, just 3 rule of thumbs when you're working with animations, not just 3D, but 3D animations. First of all, watch out of unreachable content. As we said, some animations has a lot of divs in them. For example, I have a cube and I have a text on one of the sides of the cube. I still want it to be reachable from sight readers, and any type of assistive technologies that people use. It still need to be reachable. The second thing, don't forget to use focus state. A lot of people use keyboard navigation for a lot of reasons. If you are doing some sort of 3D like the checkbox, for example, I can actually show you that as an example. This checkbox also have a fully keyboard navigation. I can move, I can select, and so on. So it is important to remember the focus state. And the third rule is when you're doing animations, don't you do animations. Use preferred reduced motion. Preferred reduced motion is when some people can't see animations, again, for a lot of reasons. So you have a media query that is preferred reduced motion, and inside of them you can tone down the animations or whatever you like, do duration 0 or animation none or whatever is suitable to your needs. There's actually a great article by Michelle Barker about preferred reduced motion, and it has all the solutions in it. So if you are dealing with it, go check out this essay. Yeah, so any questions so far? No. So
we just had one from Edward regarding if you have some link that covers what triggers reflows and repaints. So we could help out with a reflow one.
Yeah, I actually did a small workshop about how to do CSS animations and stay performant. I can link it if you want, but there's also CSS triggers, CSS trigger animations.
From Paul Lewis, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll try, or we'll dig it up later and
yeah, okay.
post the link.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna find that. Yeah, so well, I actually wanted to go back to this. I wanted to write some code. Let me close all these animations. We don't want to have the browser work too hard, right? Okay. This, not, yeah. Okay, so now ready? Oh, that's not what I was talking about. Yeah. No, there's a list made by I think Sormos. I don't know. Well, we're gonna find it later. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's write some code, and I want to start by something very, very basic. I have here, this is my HTML. I have a scene, it's like a wrapping div, and we're going to talk about why this wrapping div is important, why I like to use it. And inside of it, I have just a very small div with a box class on it. And here in the CSS, And you can see I have nothing special inside of it. Just inside the scene, I have like display grid and place item center. But the box has a width and a height and a background color, and I want to add animation to it. I'm going to have an animation, a rotation. I'm going to do the animation rotate for 10 seconds, infinite because I want it to loop, and linear. It's the if. This is the keyframes, and now it's gonna, when I press save, now it's gonna rotate. But again, it doesn't really look like it's rotating. It just looks like it's getting thinner. Why? Because there's no perspective yet. So let's go right here to the body and add perspective. And I'm going to write a value, and we're going to talk about this value in a few seconds. But one question I get, I'm going to save, and now we can see that it's actually rotating. But a lot of people ask me, why do I put my perspective in the body? And this is it's a good question, because you can actually, instead of giving the perspective to the body, I can also give the perspective right here to the box itself as a function to have like a perspective and to like 10 pixels. Oops. Of course, I'm going to need to copy it over here also. So this is also going to work. So a lot of people are going to ask me why I'm not using this and why I'm also always giving the perspective to the body. And the reason, to understand the reason, let's look at a different example. Let's look at this example. So here, this is the HTML. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Here I have two grids. Okay, and inside of the grid, inside of each grid, I have nine divs, 9 boxes. And in one of the grids, the first grid got a property, perspective property class, and this one has a perspective function class. And you can see here in the CSS, these two classes, they're practically the same, unless except this one get a lime green background, this one get a hot pink background. And both of them get a transform of rotate x. This is the x-axis, so they're rotating like this. And it's a variable. And there's a bit of JavaScript here that when I move this slide bar, this the value of this custom property changes. But again, I'm moving it, and it doesn't look like it rotates. Again, because there's no perspective. So I'm going to come here to the first example, and I'm going to add this perspective as a property. So I'm going to add perspective, let's say 200 pixels. Okay. So now when I So now when I move the slide, we can see the perspective, and we can see that it rotates. Okay, no problem. And now let's go to the second example. And here in the second example, I'm going to give the cube the perspective, not the container, the perspective, but each one of the cubes right here in the function, as a function. So we'll say perspective, again, 200 pixels. So now when I move the slide, we can actually see the difference, because look at the pink one. Each one of the pink square has its own perspective, and it has its own vanishing point. But on the other side, because I set the perspective on the container, it has one vanishing point. So this is why I like to set my perspective to the body, and then all the kids has the same vanishing point, and it looks more real. And some people will say, okay, but the other thing I can do is instead of giving this perspective, I can give it a transform perspective. And you'd think it would work, because I'm actually giving the container a perspective, but I'm giving the container the perspective, not its children. So when I move it, it won't look like it get any perspective. What I can do is have a transform style that is preserved 3D. It means I'm going to preserve this perspective of the parents to its children, and now it's going to work as expected. Except that the parent, the grid itself, also get perspective, which it doesn't really need. So this method you can use it, but this method is better. And again, this is what I'm using perspective on the body most of the time. So back to this. Yeah. So back to our box. So we add perspective, and I told you why I'm adding perspective here on the body. Oh wait, I see a questions here in the chat. Well, I can actually set the perspective, Edward, on the scene. Again, just because maybe I will have like a floor beneath the scene or something. I like to put the perspective way up top to the parent, to the body, because again, most of the time I'm just doing scenes. But if I would create a component that has 3D, so yeah, I would put the perspective on the container of the component. In this example, it would be the scene. So yeah, okay, so this is why I put it here, but okay, so now I want to ask you, what is this value? What is this 800 pixel value means? And I know Christian knows the answer, but can anybody else write the answer in the chat, or maybe just unmute yourself for a second and tell me what this value, this 800 pixels means? Anybody? The distance of the vanishing point. This is actually the vanishing point. Okay, so that is a good answer, and this is the answer that you will get in most sites and in most things. But I didn't like that answer, and I'm going to explain why in a second. I'm going to explain why, because we said that perspective makes the thing that is closer to you look bigger, and if it's farther from you, so it looks smaller. And the value of the perspective is the distance of the vanishing point, the distance of the vanishing point from the center of the z-axis, from the z-axis 0. Okay, so according to this logic, if I'm going to say instead of 800, let's say 1800, so I'm going to move way back. So if I'm going to move way back, so this box, this cube, square, is going to be smaller, right? So let's save it, and it's actually not smaller. Let's try a much bigger number, like 18,000. Okay, and I'm going to save it, and there is something changed. Okay, but it's not getting any smaller or bigger. Let's try a small number, like 150 pixels. Okay, so now we see some kind of something weird happen. We're going to talk about this weird something happened, but again, the size of the square didn't change, and I had to ask myself why. Because if I'm moving back and forth, so the size should change, right? Well, actually, no. And to understand why, and to understand really what happens when you change this value, we need to look at the view box. So let's come back to the HTML. I'm going to add a div right here. I'm going to call it a view. Oops. I'm going to call it a view box. Okay. And right here in the CSS, I'm going to create a class of view box. Well, let's create it here. View box, we're gonna say that it's gonna be position fixed because I want it to be on the entire view box. So let's say instead of 0, and just so we can see it, let's set a border, excuse me, of let's say at pixel solid yellow. Yeah, okay, so this is the view box, this yellow frame, and just so we can see it even better, let's give it a background color of, it's a white background color, but with just a little bit of transparency. So now this div, this view box actually acts like a screen, so we can see that the square, when it's rotating, the back side of the square looks lighter because it's on the back side of the screen, and the front side is on the front side of the screen, so it's look a bit darker. So again, let's do like this. Excuse me. Let's look at it on full screen, and we said that when we change the perspective, the size of the square doesn't change. I actually have this small slider right here in the corner, and when I change the perspective, so for example, I'll make it very, very big, we can see again something changed, but nothing, not the size. And if I make it again very small, so again we will see the same discord that we've seen earlier, but it's not the size that is changing. So what is changing? to understand, let's look at it from a different angle. Let's get a different perspective on the same thing. Let's look at it from here. Okay, so from a second ago we were this pink dot. Okay, and now we're gonna look at this entire scene from the side. And you said that the value, this value is this line, the distance between this vanishing point to the center of the screen. When I set a larger number, it gets farther. When I get closer, it's smaller number. And again, it's true, but there's something else going on. And I said that if you want to understand, we need to look at the viewport, because it's not the view box, the viewport. I'm sorry, because again, the vanishing point always looking at the viewport. If we look at it on the side, we could actually see that if I'm changing the value, I'm not only changing the distance from the screen, I'm also changing the angle in which I'm viewing the screen. And when I'm changing the angle, it's just like I'm using a camera. When I'm zooming in, I'm actually making the lens longer. By making the lens longer, I'm making the viewing angle smaller, so things look bigger. So by changing this value, I'm not just changing the distance, I'm also changing the viewing angle. So it is important to remember. It's like when you're holding a camera, it's like moving back and zooming in the same time, or moving close and zooming out. And we talk about this distortment when you get really close, you get a really wide viewing angle, which is in camera it calls fisheye lens, that creates the same distort that we've seen here, like not here, yeah, here, the same distort, because it's a fisheye lens, because we're watching it from very close, so the effect look much stronger. So, okay, so if I'm moving the value of the perspective, it's not just the distance, it's also changing the angle, the viewing angle. How do I change just the distance without changing the viewing angle? Because sometimes I want to create some animations and I don't want to change the viewing angle. Well, this is why I said in the beginning that I like to wrap everything in a scene, and then I can take this scene and I can move it back and forth according to what I need, and I'm not changing the perspective angle of the perspective. So okay, moving back and forth we understood, but what about moving left to right, like from here left to right, because I'm looking at it from the top right now, or moving up to down? There must be a better solution for that. And if you know perspective, so you probably also know about perspective origin. And perspective origin, I used to think for a very long time that it gives you just that, it moving the perspective point, the vanishing point, left and right or up and down. And it does that, but again, it does something else. If I'm going to move this perspective point from left to right, because we're looking at from the side, okay? So I'm going to move it left to right. So you can see, yes, the vanishing point, the perspective point actually does move left to right, but it also changes the perspective, the viewing angle. And again, if you can look at things that we would see on this side, you can see that the viewing angle is very wide. So it would look like it's closer, but because it's wide, it's going to look like it's farther. And in this side, because it's farther from the vanishing point, but the viewing angle is very narrow, so it would look bigger. So there's some sort of compensation happening every time you are setting the perspective origin. And when I say compensation, I do mean some sort of distortment of your image. So when you are using perspective origin, by definition, you're distorting your image. That's why I almost completely stopped using perspective origin. And again, I'm just using the scene to move it. And let's look at a nice example that I built again for the for the live meetup in Amsterdam. So here I have a very simple animation. Wait a minute, this is the animation. And by the way, just a nice side note. This animation, you can see there's a 5 by 5 by 5, so there's 125 cubes here. and each cube has 6 sides, so it's a lot of divs, but actually there's only 30 divs here. So just as a side note, you can think how it's done. And if you want the answer, ask me in the end. So yeah, I have a cube here, and it rotates, and it rotates because here on the body I already set the perspective. You see the perspective? It's a custom property called perspective, and here I actually set this on the root. I set this custom property to 1,000 pixels, but I also set a bunch of other variables. So, by the way, a lot of people, when they talk about moving things, they talk about penning, like pen left, pen right, pen up, pen down, pen straight. No, there's actually different words for any of those. So moving on the z-axis, it's called dolly. Moving on the y-axis, called pedestal. Moving on the left, is called truck. Which libraries use? None. It's pure CSS. You're missing the whole concept of the presentation. Pure CSS. Yeah. So pen is actually like this. This is tilt and this is roll, and we're actually going to use these variables to set our camera or our scene to what we want. So right here on the scene, we're going to come and write some code now. So I'm going to close this. Yeah. So right here on the scene, we're going to give this transform, not the metrics, and we're going to do a few things in this transform, obviously, because we want to deal with all of these elements. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to translate on all 3 axes, and as I said, so I'm going to translate on the x-axis. This is the truck, okay, and I'm going to multiply it by -1 because the x and the z-axis is in the computer is upside down, that we on what we were used to in the real world. The y-axis is normal. So so on the x-axis, I'm going to calculate the camera truck times -1. The top is on to the pedestal, and the translate z. This is the dolly. So now I can actually come. I can come here and I can change the dolly, for example, to 500, and now I'm moving backward. If I move it to -500, I'm moving closer. And the same thing, like the pedestal, I can move up, I can move down, and so on. We're going to look at more examples. The second thing we will need to do is to rotate everything. But here's the thing. If I'm going to come right here, for example, let's start with the simple one. Let's start with the pen. Okay, so I'm going to do rotate Y, the camera pen. So now, if I come over here and I say, for example, 20 degrees, it's going to rotate. But it's not the camera. It's not rotating. I'm rotating the element itself, the scene itself, and it's not what I want to do. I want to rotate the camera. So in order to do it, I actually need to manipulate the element. I first need to move it to the center of the axis, and then need to rotate it, and then need to move it back. So right here, I'm going to move in here in the beginning. I'm going to use the translate Z to move it back to the center of the axis by moving it in the perspective. So now it's the same value as the perspective right here. Okay, and in the end, after I'm doing all the rotation, I'm actually going to move it back. So I'm going to multiply it by -1. And now I can also bring in all 3 variables. Yep. So now when I change the pen, for example, oops, and save, you can see that the camera moved and not the element itself. And so yeah, so now, for example, I can say, let's move 500 backwards, or let's move 500 pixel up, and let's change the tilt, or let's change the roll, excuse me, for 40, oh, -40. I want it to go down. So in this way, you can actually create camera angles, and that is what I've done. So I actually done here. Oops. This is not what I wanted to do. Excuse me. I put a little radio buttons here. Okay. And each one of those, I'm using CSS, of course. I'm going to see here. By using each one of those, I'm setting different values for those elements. So this is camera 1, this is camera 2, this is camera 3, this is camera 4. But of course, the nice thing that we can do, because transform is transitionable, so we can add a transition of transform, let's say 1 second. And yeah, so now when I'm moving cameras, I can actually animate the camera movement from one spot to the other. Yeah, any questions so far? No, okay. Okay, so back to our square, to our original square, original box, excuse me. We can actually wait, there's one thing more that I wanted to say. No, I think we cover so far. So okay, so now let's turn this box. I removed the view box because we don't really need it. And again, it was supposed to be viewport, not view box. As I said in the beginning, I'm sorry, I'm working a lot with the SVGs lately. A bit more than CSS. So okay, so we want to make this box or this square into a box. So how do we do it? As I said, the best way to build a box is just by constructive methods. So okay, so let's inside of this box, let's create 6 sides. Okay, sides times 6 tab. I have 6 sides inside my my square, my box, excuse me. So now let's go to the box and give each one of those sides, because I want each one of those sides to be position absolute to the parent, which means I need the parents to be position relative. And I'm going to give it again an inset of 0, just so it could be full size, and again give it a background color of white. Oops, and yeah, let's give it an opacity of 0.6. Okay, so now I have a box, a div, and inside of it I have 6 boxes, and I need to position each one of them. I need to put each one in its place. So I can, by the way, here in the HTML, I used to do to use classes like up, down, left, right, but now it's just more comfortable for me just by using the nth child. Use whatever is comfortable for you. So nth child 1 means I'm selecting the first child, and I want to move it forward. I want it to be the front side, and this is probably the easiest one. I'm just going to use transform, and I want to translate, want to move it, and I want to translate on the z-axis. This is the z-axis, so I'm going to write translate z. Okay, and let's say it's 200 pixel long, so 100 pixel, it's half of the size. So yeah, very simple. Now I have the front side of the cube facing front. No problem. Okay, what about the back? It's supposed to be pretty easy, right? If I'm 100 pixel moving it to the front, minus 100 pixel, going to move it to the back, right? No. It looks okay, but it's deceiving, and I'm going to show you why. Let's say that here I have words. Let's say yes and no. Okay, so, and just so we can actually see it better, let's add where is it? Okay. Why it's not, no, okay, let's say that the font size is 50 pixels and display grid. I just want to position it. Place item. Okay, so now you can see that the yes, that when the yes side is in the front, we can read the word yes, there's no problem. But when the word no is in the front, it's actually upside down because the front side of the back is in the back, and you understood what I said. It doesn't look okay. So what we can do, obviously, just come here and do rotate. I want to rotate it on the y-axis, so let's rotate y 180 degrees. So now when the yes is in the front, we can see the front of the front, and when the no is in the front, it's clear. So this is one method that you can use. But as I said, the order in which those things are written is important. So if I would move the rotate Y to the beginning of the translate, before the translate, and I press save, now they're both in the same position, because again, I didn't just move it back and rotate it. I first rotate it and then move it back. So I actually move it forward. So you can use this, and I actually prefer using this. I just, instead of moving it back minus by 100 pixels, just move it forward 100 pixels, and then we have the solution that we need. And the reason I like to use it, because I can then very easily set the left and the right just by, I'm not rotating it 180 degrees, just rotating it 90 degrees to the right and 270 degrees to the left. So let's say this is 90 and this is 270. So now we have all four sides of the cube. So far, so good. Is there anyone who likes to help me about with the top and bottom? I'm looking at the chat, or I'm listening to anybody. No. Okay. So actually, the top and bottom. Yes, Edward. Yes, very good. It's very easy. Just instead of rotating it on the y-axis and then moving it, we can rotate it on the x-axis and then move it. So again, very simple. Just rotate X 90 degrees and move it up, and rotate X 270 degrees and move it down. Again, you can create the same cube, and by the way, now we can see that we have all 6 sides. Again, you can create the same cube in various different methods. This is just one method that I prefer. And we can do, by the way, now we can actually remove the green color, and we can see that there's 6 sides, but if we want to see it in more clearer, one thing that I like to do is to add to each side, to each side, I like to add a box shadow with no inset. You can add inset if you want. Let's say, I don't know, it's 10 pixels, so let's say 40 pixels, black, obviously, but I do add an inset. So now the shadow is inside each one of the divs. And if you look at the cube here, and once I click save, you can actually see the difference, that you can see each one of those sides much better. Let's change this to 9. Okay, so it's very easy to build a cube, but we want to control the cube. We don't want just the animation to rotate. We can if we do, but let's for a second remove this animation. Okay, and I want to control it. I want to when I hover over the box, I want it to rotate. So it's very simple. I just add the hover pseudo class, and inside the hover pseudo class, excuse me, I'm just using transform. Well, of course, it's supposed to be 180. This is the problem with live coding. And now when I hover over it, you can see the no, but I don't want it to jump. I want it to transition. So of course, I'm just coming over here. Excuse me. Coming over here, and I'm going to add a transition on the transform. Let's say it's 0.5 seconds. Oops. Yeah, so now when I hover over it, you can see that it moves. And just like hover, I can also use active. If you don't know active, by the way, it means that it's on click. So let's say that the rotate Z is on click. So now when I hover it, it rotates on the Y, and when I click it, like this, okay? But it's not, when I hover out it comes back to the original shape. And I want to make this like a real active working checkbox. So how do I do that? First of all, let's comment these parts out. And if I want to turn this box into a checkbox, what I need to do is to come right here to the HTML. And first, I'm going to add a checkbox. Checkbox. I'm going to give it an ID. Checkbox. Yeah, so now we have a checkbox, and when I click it, it's checked. obviously, but we don't want the checkbox to click on the checkbox. We want this to be the checkbox. So here, instead of the div, I'm just going to turn it into a label. I'm going to turn it into a label. I'm going to say that it's for the CB. Okay, and now when I click on the box, we can see that the checkbox is checked. Okay, so far so good, but how does it help us? Simple. Let's go back to the CSS. And okay, the first thing that we need to do into the input is we don't want to see it, as I said. So let's say display none. Let's just get it out of here. But we do want to say that if this input is checked, okay, but I want to rotate, but I don't want the input to rotate. I want the sibling of the checkbox to rotate. So I can just use this plus box, and now inside here I can rotate the checkbox. So now when I hover, there's nothing happened. But when I click it, it rotates, and of course I can leave it. And when I click it back, it rotates again. And here we have fully functional checkbox, 3D checkbox. And this animation of transitioning is very, very simple, but you can do whatever animation, whatever transition, obviously, that you need, that you want, or whatever. Any questions? Okay. So we're gonna see this one more example that I wanted to show, which is working with the layered. Hello, Leah. Okay, so one more example is I want to show an example working with layers. So here I have, oops. Here I have a very simple div. Nothing else, just a class of hello, and inside of it there is a hello. And in the CSS, we can see just I have a very simple transform and a font size, really nothing special. But again, I said it, instead of just hello, I want to create this big, thick title. So what I'm going to do is come here to the HTML, and instead of the text, instead of the hello, I'm going to add dot layer, and I'm going to do like let's say 30 layers. Okay, it sounds a lot, but I'm not going to do any serious animations here or anything. So 30 layers is going to look okay. So that's all I have here. And let's go back to the layered to the CSS. Excuse me. And in the CSS, what I want to do, let's add a layer. So the layer, obviously all the layers need to be position absolute to the footer, because I don't want them to stack one another. So it's going to be position absolute. So the hello needs to be, again, position relative. And I'm going to do something, a transform. And as I said, I want to stack them layer after layer after layer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a translate of Z. Okay, and I'm going to move each one of them in a different value. So I'm going to give them a custom property, transform Z. So to create this custom property, we're going to do a simple loop. But by the way, I haven't spoken about it in the beginning. I am working in Sass. You can do, obviously, everything I'm doing in pure CSS, but because I'm working a lot with loops, I just find it with loops and with nested values, nested class. So I'm just find it more comfortable working with CSS. So let's create a loop. We said we have 30 layers, and we have, this is a CSS loop for I from 0 to count. This count is 30. And inside this nth child, and for each iteration, I'm creating a new nth child selector. We can actually see, if you want, I'm going to show you how it's compiled to CSS in a second. So let's just create this variable, and we say that, let's say we want to move it 1 pixel, times 1 pixel for each layer. Again, just to show you how it compiles, so it looks like this. So layer 1 gets 0, layer 2 1 pixel, layer 3 1. Again, you can write it normally in pure CSS. It's just going to take longer. but it's again CSS. So okay, I transformed it, but I actually forgot to show something. We're not seeing anything, but actually even without seeing anything, we can come here to the body, to the DevTools, and you can see if I'm moving on the layers, you can actually see this the marker moves because I've translated on the z-axis each one of them 1 pixel, so you can actually see it move. But let's create some content. Should do it before that, and I'm going to use when I'm working with layers, I'm inserting the content by using an after or before by using a pseudo element, because the pseudo elements get a nice content property, and then I can say hello, and now all of them has the same content. So when I need to change the content, I only need to change it in one place and not in several places. Yeah, so now we can see it's the hello. Let's supposed to be position absolute. Let's put it back in the center, and this is they're all white, so you don't really see you kind of see the silhouette of what I'm aiming for, but it's not the end the not what I want to do in the end. What I do want to do is to add different color, excuse me, for each layer. So the top layer going to be lighter, whiter, and then the bottom layer would look darker, but less light gets to it. So let's add another variable right here. We're going to call it light. And this variable, it's supposed to be, I'm going to tell what this variable is supposed to be. The best way to change color of a font is by using an HSL. The best option for me at this point, there's a lot of changes in the color world in CSS recently. So this is what I'm used to doing right now. So HSL get a hue of 0 because I'm just working with white and black. The saturation also 0. And here I'm going to add this light custom property. And here in the light custom property, so it needs to be anywhere from 0% to 100%. So let's say I times 3% because we have 30 layers plus 10. Okay, so now, that's great. So now the bottom layers looks darker, the top looks wider. Yeah, color mix is gonna be better, Igor. But as I started saying that it's the best method, I said, it used to be the best method. Now there's so many different things, and I'm not actually sure what's gonna be the best a year from now. But this is one method, and it's one method that I'm familiar with, and I'm comfortable working with. And one more thing, by the way, because it's the bottom, actually the first layer, it's the bottom, and it's the darker one. So I actually do like to add right here. Let's add it beneath the after. I like to add first child. So the first child it's the bottom layer, and to the after, I'm actually like to add text shadow. With no offset, because it's like it's lying on the floor, and let's do like 10 pixels black, and so yeah, now it's adding this little light shadow on the bottom, like it's laying on the floor. And yeah, so that was pretty quick, and you can see how you can create this 3D title and with pure CSS, and there's no problem. And actually, the nice thing about using one more nice thing using content is that this property is actually, and you can animate it. It sounds weird, but you actually can do it. You can. It's not really animation. It's like transition. It's like you just replace one content in another. But let's say animation, text. 2 seconds, infinite again, because I want it to be a loop. And we're going to use step end. So now let's add the keyframes. Excuse me. Oh, okay. Let's add the keyframes of text. So in the 0% in the beginning, I want the content to be, content to be hello, and in the 50 in the middle, so in the 50%, I want to say world. So now when I save it, you can see that we actually have animation. It's not really animation, it's just changing the content, but you can have fully animatable titles, 3D. And again, the performance on this is very, very high. There's no reason to fear using these types of animations. Yeah, questions. I need questions now. What when you apply text shadow on all of them instead of the color? You can. Let's see. I can if I put them on all of them, so it's just gonna look like this. It's actually a nice effect. Not the worst effect, but if you are using this, so maybe we don't need a color. Okay. Maybe we can even use color transparent. Yeah, no. Oops. Animating time in my evening is now ruined. Why? Oh yeah. If you want to see, there's a nice pen I made of typing effect, right? A typewriting effect that actually used this method, and I think that this method is actually might be better than other methods that use width or something. So yeah, animating the content is something that you can absolutely use. Oops. Something is wrong with the colors. I ruined something. I don't know what. Oops, okay. I'm sorry, I'm not following. Christian, do you want to? Are there any questions?
I think we have one question regarding the content property, not so much related to animation, but more to accessibility. Is it?
Oh yeah, so I actually I had the same questions. I talked with I had this I forgot his name. Anyway, the content that is in pseudo classes is part of the content tree that site readers and accessible technologies use, and they do read this content. So it's not that it's that you need to if you really want to be accessible, you actually need to hide it on all of the layers except the first one, or except the last one. I don't know. This as it is, it's going to read the same word 30 times right now in assistive technologies. So yeah, you do need to add some sort of area labels or something to make it more accessible.
Then we have a few attendees who ask if you will make available your code pens and live coding examples so that they later can try to
well, I actually did all of the examples locally because I didn't want to interfere with the network because of doing it live. But yeah, I do have versions for pretty much everything on my code pen. Yeah, so it's there. If it's not there, if you want something specific that I forgot to put it there. So just maybe I will do like this, not like this, like this. Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter and ask me whatever you need, and I'm going to give it to you.